What's up everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to be taking apart this PS1 and we're going to be giving it a deep clean. This console's not terribly dirty, but I did buy it used, so obviously it's going to be a little bit dirty, and it's having this issue where the lid does not want to stay closed after you hit eject. There's something preventing the button from popping back up into place. This is a common issue on consoles that have a flip lid like this, and I have a feeling it's probably just dirty. The outside is definitely the cleanest part of this console. You can see the memory card slots are a little bit dirty, but the rest of it isn't too bad. My main thing is I want the inside to be clean because I don't know if this thing's ever been opened before, and I also want to make sure that the disk drive is in good working order and make sure that that flip lid can go back where it's supposed to. As you can see, this particular console was manufactured in November of 1999. So that means that this console was manufactured just a couple months before the slimmer revision of the PS1 came out in May of 2000. Starting off, this thing is super simple to take apart. There's just 6 screws on the bottom, and you just take those out. There's not any hidden underneath the feet on the bottom, so that's great. After you get the 6 screws out, all you have to do is flip it around and the top lifts right off. As you can see, it's not terribly dirty in here, but the biggest concern is how dirty it is under the open button. I did find some bugs in here, but not very many. They were just ladybugs, so nothing to worry about. As long as I don't find roaches or bed bugs, I'm happy. There's definitely quite a bit of dirt and buildup on the lip where the top of the shell meets the bottom of the shell, and this is probably, in my opinion, the most common place for dirt to build up, especially on handheld consoles, and I would say probably the most common for a PS1 like this too, because there's no fan in it, so you're not going to have dust build up on a fan if there's not a fan. Next, I'm going to get these cables removed and out of the way. This first cable is just for the controller and memory card port, and it just pulls right out of both sides. This next cable just runs power from the power board to the motherboard, and same thing with the other cable. This one just pulls right out of both sides, but it's a little more difficult to pull out, so be careful. And I'm not sure how to take out that middle clip, so I'm just going to leave it there. Next, I'm going to take out this ribbon cable for the disk drive, and be very careful with this. I was worried because it started making a scraping noise as I was taking it out, but apparently that's common on these, so just be careful, make sure you don't break anything. I swear ribbon cables are probably the easiest thing to break when you're taking apart a console, so make sure you take your time with those and don't pull on them too hard or bend them too badly so you don't tear them up. Now that I have both of the cables unplugged for the disk drive, I'm going to pull it out. Luckily, this disk drive isn't too dirty, so I think the only thing that I'll have to do on it is to clean the laser, and there's a couple cobwebs underneath of it, so I'll clean those out too. Now that that's out, I'm going to get these controller ports out of the way, and there's only 2 screws that hold that in place. Next, I'm going to take out this power board, and once again, there are only 2 screws holding it in place. You do need to watch it though, because there are 2 tabs on the side, on the right side of it, that hold it into place, so you kind of have to take it out at an angle. And now that that's out, you can start to see where it has gotten dirty. There's definitely some dirt and dust and whatever else underneath the power board, and I'm sure there's going to be more under the motherboard. So we're going to go ahead and get that taken out. To take off this metal shielding, there are 4 screws holding it in place, and once those are out, the metal shielding will just lift straight up. Now that the metal shielding's off, there's just 2 screws left holding this motherboard in, and go ahead and take those out, and it'll just lift straight up. Once I got that metal shielding off, it really surprised me how small this PS1 motherboard is. I figured it would be at least a little bit bigger, considering that the Super Nintendo motherboard is significantly bigger than the PlayStation 1 motherboard. As you can see, this board isn't too dirty. I would say that the metal shielding probably protected it pretty well. Only one of the chips has very much dust on it, and so I'll get that cleaned up later. And with that, there are no screws left in this, so the last two pieces of metal will just come right out. I've got to say, I was pleasantly surprised to see how easily this thing comes apart. I've done a lot of consoles that are a huge pain to tear apart, and so it's always nice to work on one that is easy to take apart. I started cleaning this with isopropyl alcohol, but then I realized it would probably be easier to just start with compressed air. Blowing off the parts ahead of time with some... Is this some kind of sick joke? All kidding aside, starting with that really does make the process easier for whenever you are cleaning with isopropyl alcohol, because you won't have to waste as many Q-tips and cotton balls trying to get all the dust off that you could have just blew off with compressed air. That being said, you're definitely not going to get all of it with compressed air though. In fact, I'm always lucky if I even get half of it. So definitely use some, but isopropyl alcohol is still your best friend when you're cleaning stuff like this. That being said, I'm going to speed through cleaning the rest of this up for you guys. All in all, I'd say the bottom of the shell cleaned up pretty well, so I'm going to go ahead and start putting things back together. As you can see, a lot of these metal pieces have some rust on them, and the best way to deal with this is to throw them in an ultrasonic cleaner, but unfortunately I don't have anything that fancy to use, so it's just going to have to stay that way. I don't think it'll hurt anything, but it just doesn't look pretty. Now that the shielding is back into place, I'm going to put this power board back into place. And like I said earlier, there's two tabs on the right side, so just make sure you're fitting the board underneath those tabs. Next, we're going to put the main board back into place and make sure this is seated properly. Definitely make sure all the screw holes line up the way they should, and don't force anything if the screws are not going. I'm just going to clean up some of this a little bit. This board is not dirty at all. Like I said earlier, there's just a little bit of dust on there that needs cleaned. Next, I'm going to clean up the top of the shielding. Again, it's not horrible, but it definitely needs a good wipe down, so I'm going to try to get as much dirt off of it as I can. Now that that's all cleaned up, I can go ahead and put it back into place. This goes for all the parts, but especially this, make sure it's lined up properly. You definitely don't want to damage anything on the board underneath if it's not lined up properly and you're trying to screw a screw into a hole that's not there. Next, I'm going to go ahead and get the power cord plugged back into place. Alright, and now it is time to clean up this controller / memory card port a little bit. There's some bug gunk in between the ports, and there was a ladybug shell there. But other than that, like I said, not too many bugs, thank goodness. Now that it's all cleaned up, we can go ahead and screw it back into place too. Next, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the cable for the ports. And now that this thing is mostly back together, we can go ahead and take a look at the disk drive. Like I said earlier, this thing is definitely not too bad. It just had a little bit of cobweb underneath of it that needed cleaned up. And I am going to clean the laser because it looked a little bit dirty, but definitely not too bad. And now that the disk drive is cleaned up, we can go ahead and put it back into place too and get it plugged in. To reiterate what I said earlier, please be careful with the ribbon cable when you're plugging it back in, as again, they're super easy to break and you definitely don't want to break it. Otherwise, you're probably going to be replacing the whole disk drive. Now that that's all taken care of, I'm going to try to clean up the outside of the top shell a little bit. And now to get to the whole reason I took this thing apart to begin with. This just is held in by 2 screws, and you just want to pull that out. And there's 2 tabs holding each of these buttons in, so you just want to press those in, and the button should press right out. And I'm just going to clean underneath of these buttons and clean the sides of the buttons, because sometimes dirt and gunk, and I've even seen pop sometimes spilled in these, will build up and make it sticky, so that way the buttons won't work properly. Unfortunately, this didn't entirely fix my issue, but it's definitely not nearly as bad as what it was. And since this is my personal PlayStation, I'm fine with it, so I'm gonna move on. Now that the top shell is nice and clean, we can go ahead and put it back into place. So as you can see, this thing definitely wasn't terribly dirty, but it did need cleaned up, and I did miss a spot here in the back, so I am going to go ahead and get that cleaned up real quick. But overall, it cleaned up pretty nice, and it's definitely nowhere near the worst console I've ever seen. But still, I recommend, if it's been a while since your console's been taken apart and cleaned, or if it's never been taken apart and cleaned, get it cleaned, because it's going to run cooler, run better, and sometimes you get a console and you have no information on it. So I bought this thing, I have no idea if it's ever been cleaned before, so it never hurts. Now that this is all cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and get it plugged in and tested. As you can see, I'm using an AV to HDMI adapter. My brother got me this for Christmas, and it really comes in handy because I don't have a CRT, unfortunately. So this allows me to plug my AV consoles into my monitor. One thing I like about this too is you can swap it between 720p and 1080p, which I always use 1080p, but it's nice to have the option. While I have this thing plugged in, I'm also going to test two PlayStation 1 memory cards that I have that I've never been able to test, and we're going to see what's on them. So I was having a crisis when I first tried to turn this on, because I know that I plugged everything in properly because I went back and looked at the footage and everything looked great, but I was still getting no signal. Nothing was displaying. The console was on. I could hear it trying to read the disc. It just wouldn't display anything. So I started doing all kinds of research, looking at videos and everything, and I had myself thinking that I was going to have to replace all the capacitors in it and all this crazy stuff to get it to display. And turns out that wasn't the case. Stupid me somehow didn't have the AV cables plugged all the way into the PlayStation, and I bumped it and suddenly it displayed. So I'm an idiot, but sometimes you scare yourself like that, and you just have to mess around with it before you go into freak out mode. So now that this thing's working, we're going to go ahead and check out these memory cards. As you can see, there's nothing too crazy on here. They do have Tomb Raider 3, and they also have Spyro 2 and Resident Evil Director's Cut, and that's really the only thing of any note that I see on here. It also looks like they have the original Tomb Raider as well as Silent Hill. But moving on, we're gonna go ahead and check out this other memory card. I really like the way this one looks. The clear green look is so awesome. And there's also a PS2 memory card that looks like this, and I have it too, and I think that they're both awesome. Taking a look at this one, it looks like they have Yu-Gi-Oh!, Atari, the first Spyro. They also have Spyro 2, the original Crash Bandicoot, Final Fantasy VIII, another Final Fantasy VIII, and a Final Fantasy VII save. Moving on from that, I mostly just wanted to make sure both of those work, and we're going to be testing this with Xenogears, and the main reason for this is one of the very few PS1 games that I have. I gotta tell you guys, this game is really cool, and I haven't played through all of it. I've only played through a little bit of it, but I definitely want to do a full playthrough at some point because this game looks awesome, and everyone I see talk about it says it's awesome. Well, the game's all loaded up, and it looks like it's working great, so I'm glad to see that. And while I do my outro, I'm going to let some of the gameplay play in the background. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think that you now have the skills to take open a PlayStation 1? I certainly think you do. Like I said, these are super simple. You could probably teach anybody to take one of these apart. So let me know if any of you are going to brave cleaning your PlayStation 1 after seeing this. And also, let me know if you guys want to see any mods for the PlayStation 1. That's certainly something I can look into in the future. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. If you could leave a like and a sub, that would be great. I have some more videos coming up soon that I'm working on, and I'll see you guys in the next one.